Hello everyone, welcome to Psych, and today I want to talk about one of the building blocks of personality type that I think that most people tend to forget when they're attempting to type themselves and others. And that's the idea of rational and irrational functions, and how Carl Jung talked about these two things. Now, rational and irrational functions are one of the prime categories aside from subjective and objective that are used to classify all of the functions overall. So essentially, thinking and feeling are rational functions, and sensing and intuition are irrational functions. And I want to talk about what that means. Let's get into it. So what does it mean to be a rational function or an irrational function? Well, rational functions, as the name might suggest, means that these functions tend to use rationality or some sort of rationale when coming to their conclusions. And the conclusions that they make via this rationality are going to usually be more solidified in the individual's mind. When we make a judgment about something, because remember, all the rational functions are the judging functions, we're essentially placing part of ourselves into the thought or the thing that we're associating with. We're essentially making a decision on the thing that we are talking about or thinking about. Now, irrational functions, on the other end, perceiving functions, sensing and intuition, are on the opposite end of this spectrum, where if you look at a perceiving function in a void separate from rational functions, there's no decision being made about the perception. A perception is just a perception. If you were to look at a painting, you would be able to say, this is a painting. Perception tells you what something is. If you look at the painting and you know that it is a painting, you are able to see the qualities of the painting. That is perception. Now, judgment tells us, what does this painting essentially mean to us or for the world around us? Judgment tells us, what are we saying about this painting? How do we feel about this painting? What do we think about this painting? Perception simply helps us find the qualities of this painting. The irrational functions aren't going to be making a rational decision about the painting in and of itself, which is to say that if you look at this painting and you see the colors inside of it, or you see the themes associated with it, maybe sensing or intuition in either case, you're going to be just seeing the perceptions associated with this painting. It is not until you turn those perceptions into a judgment that it becomes the judging functions, or the judging functions become involved. That is what separates the irrational and the rational functions overall, is that the irrational ones aren't going to be making the decisions in and of themselves. It is simply the perceiving functions that inform the rational or judging functions and help them make their decisions based on what is being perceived. This matters most when we look at the dominant function of a specific personality type, or any of the given personality types. Because if you look at it, there's going to be 8 rational dominant types, and there's going to be 8 irrational dominant types. And the EPs and the IJs are going to be the ones that lead with perceiving or irrational functions, while the EJs and the IPs lead with rational or judging functions. Now, what does this mean for these specific types? Well, it means those that lead with rational functions are going to be far more likely to come to definite conclusions or rational decisions on the things that they perceive. They're going to prefer to make rational decisions, which is why you find that EJs and IPs tend to hold stronger opinions for the things that they are interested in as compared to the IJs and the EPs. The IJs and the EPs, the irrational/perceiving dominant types, because they lead with an irrational function, prefer to simply take in information and not make a decision on that information unless they absolutely have to. This is going to seem different or kind of even weird when you look at the introverted types, because you look at an IP and they present with their extrovert perceiving function, and therefore it looks like maybe they aren't the most decisive person in the outer world. But if you look at their inner world, if you look at what truly matters to them, you'll see that they're very decided on these specific things. If you look at an IJ, IJs tend to be the ones who shape their external world via their extroverted judging function. But if you look at their inner world, they're usually not so much decided on things such as, politics or other heavier kind of rational focused topics. These types are going to be the types of people who usually are less interested in coming to final conclusions on information unless they feel like they absolutely have to. All of this is where the growth points for these specific types can come in as well. So, for example, the rational dominant types, the EJs and the IPs, their biggest growth point with their auxiliary function is learning to stop and take in information via the irrational functions. If you quickly come to definite rational conclusions about everything you come across, like most EJs and IPs do in their younger days, you're going to seem usually either arrogant or extremely decided, one-minded, these sorts of things. And you're not going to be able to get along with many people because you'll be too decided on the things that you're invested in, and you won't be able to convey your opinions because you haven't taken in enough information about them to fully understand them or explain the opinions of yours or understand the opinions of others. And this is why it's important for these rational dominant types to develop the irrational function so they can stop and learn to take in information when they need to. Now, on the opposite side of the spectrum, for the IJs and the EPs, it's important for them to learn how to make rational decisions about their perceptions. IJs may seem like they're very willing to make external decisions, but if you ask them about things that are in the JI or introverted judging realm, they're usually going to not have so much of a decision in that regard. They're usually going to be less decided on specific things and how they matter to them, or they're going to feel uneasy answering those types of questions. It's important for the IJs and the EPs to learn how to take action from their perceptions. A lot of IJs and EPs can stay in the land where they're just trying to perceive things, they're just trying to take in information or gather experiences, these sorts of things, and they won't make decisions based off of their perceptions. Despite what many people think, when I work with IJs in coaching, they're one of the types that really struggle with decision making, and it's because they want to make sure that they have as much information as they can before they come to a final conclusion. So it's like they're taking in this information, they're taking in this information, they're taking in this information, and it's like, okay, now you need to make a decision based on this information, and it's been 3 days and they haven't made a decision. That's going to be the struggle that the irrationals face as compared to the rationals. The irrationals are going to struggle to take their perceptions and turn them into judgments because they don't want to be forced into some sort of final conclusion, thought, or opinion about the things that they're interacting with. You can actually use this information to help find your own personality type if you are not sure what your own type is. Say, for example, if you're someone who's relatively decided, you find that you're very strongly opinionated towards certain things, there's a good chance you might be an IP or an EJ. If you find yourself someone who's pretty in the middle most of the times, and it's hard for you to put yourself on either side of that fine middle line frequently, you might be an IJ or an EP. Now, this doesn't mean that these specific types can't find themselves in the other situations sometimes. But if you look at the overall trends for these people and the types, you will see that for the most part, EJs and IPs are far more decided, while IJs and EPs are far less decided when it comes to things in the judgment realm. The IJs and EPs want to take in information, while the EJs and IPs want to come to a conclusion as quickly as they can about that information. All right, everybody, I hope you've enjoyed this discussion on rational and irrational functions. Again, I think this is one of the basic building blocks of type that people really tend to forget when they're attempting to type themselves. And usually when I'm looking to type somebody or I'm working with somebody in a typing session, it's actually one of the first things I look for before I try to find their specific personality traits. Are they a rational or an irrational dominant type? I'm not even asking, are they a thinking, feeling, sensing, or intuition type? I'm simply asking the question, are they rational or are they irrational? Are they judging or are they perceiving dominant? Once you've narrowed it down to one of those two things, then you can narrow it down even further. Oh, so they're a judging dominant type. They're a rational dominant type. Therefore, they must be thinking or feeling. And you can narrow it down from there. So let me know down in the comment section below, what do you think about rational and irrational functions? Do you think that this is an interesting thing to talk about? Has that helped you find your type at all? Are you able to notice these things in others? Let me know. Other than that, I would like to remind people that I do have personality typing sessions available at my website at sursac.com if you're interested in working with me to find out what your personality type is and what that means for you. This has been a Star from Sursac. Have a good one.